Mary Blackwood is an 18-year-old teen who narrates how the Blackwoods have always lived in their home. She lives there with her sister Constance. A large part of the roof was partially destroyed. And a burned bed as well. 6 years ago, the Blackwood mansion used to be more full with Constance and Mary's parents, but they had been murdered in their own home. Constance was apparently accused of murdering her own parents. Mary hates Tuesdays because that's when she has to go into town where everyone hates the Blackwoods. She's superstitious and decides to bury something evil to protect herself. 6 years ago, Constance was accused of killing her parents and poisoning their uncle Julian. Because of this, the townsfolk wish for the girl's ruin. At a coffee shop, Jim recognizes Mary. He had fallen in love with Constance and he was going to run away with Constance. However, Mary told her father, and her father had caused Jim to lose his job and his car. Jim and Bobby harass Mary. Jim decides to put his cigarette out inside Mary's coffee. Stella ushers her to leave so that she doesn't get hurt. As Mary walks home, a bunch of kids harass her as well. Mary arrives home and Constance says she's progressed so much with her agoraphobia. She's walked just a few feet from the house and soon Constance will be ready to go to town with Mary. Constance hasn't been to town for the past 6 years. At night, Constance tells her sister that she missed Mary when she was away. Even if it was just a short while. Mary tells her that the world is full of terrible people. In the middle of the night, Constance blasts some music from her bedroom. The next day, Mary decides to do another protection spell by burying another coin and a doll whose eyes can never shut. She hopes this will keep Constance safe. The next day, they're visited by Lucille and Helen. They used to be best friends with Mrs. Blackwood. They hope Constance comes out of the castle and join them to socialize. Uncle Julian decides to join their tea time. He recalls the gruesome murders and the taste of arsenic. He's currently writing a book about the entire thing as he's fascinated by the mystery. Uncle Julian brings Lucille to the other room so he can go over the case with her. He tells Lucille that the jury may have been infatuated with Constance's good looks. It may have hindered them from seeing the truth. However, Uncle Julian isn't the best at recalling information because he can't seem to remember much from the incident. The poisoning really jumbled his brain. In the middle of the night, Mary decides to lock up her father's old bedroom. She feels her dad is coming back from the dead. The next day, Constance makes Mary go into town to grab sugar. Mary feels paranoid doing this. It's especially frightening because that's how their parents were killed, poisoned sugar. Mary is also worried because she didn't get to do any burial rituals to protect her. Finally, when she gets back, Charles Blackwood, their cousin, comes over to meet them for the first time. Mary decides to sleep outside to stay away from him. Cousin Charles is a very charming guy as he impresses Constance and Uncle Julian. On the other hand, Mary hopes to drive him away. During dinner, Cousin Charles talks about his travels. Constance seems a little smitten by him and hopes she can travel with him sometime. Uncle Julian starts talking about his book. However, Charles doesn't seem to want to talk about it. He also doesn't want to talk about how Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood died. Uncle Julian feels disrespected by this. Charles offers to do the grocery shopping now because it's a bit unsafe for Mary to go. Constance then tells him that their father never trusted the banking system. All their money is inside a safe. Mary doesn't like this idea at all. While Mary starts talking about poisonous mushrooms, Uncle Julian mistakes Charles for her brother, John Blackwood. The two looked very similar. At night, Constance tucks Uncle Julian into bed. Charles thinks their uncle should be in the hospital. Julian tells Charles that getting poisoned having to live sucks because all he does now is wait to die. The next day, Mary hopes to bury more things to ward off Charles. However, Charles catches her burying Mr. Blackwood's gold watch. Charles thinks they should sell stuff like this. Constance tells Charles to just let Mary be. She distracts him by asking if he wants a bath, and he agrees. While he bathes, he decides to get up as he hears Constance in the other room. Constance is caught off guard since he sees his cousin's banana. She walks away slowly until Charles closes the door. Later, Mary asks Charles to leave the house. However, he refuses to leave. In the next few days, Mary narrates how Charles has pretty much taken over the household. He wears their father's clothes. He bosses Constance around. When working on the steps, Charles finds Mary's box of coins. Charles is upset because this is money they could be using. One day, Mary decides to follow Charles into town. People in town comment on how Charles looks familiar. This is because Charles resembles the late John Blackwood, Mary's dad. Charles catches Mary staring at him, so Mary walks away and keys Charles's very nice car. He's pissed when he sees his scratched-up car. Afterwards, Constance says Mary is forbidden from wandering now. Mary says Charles is purposefully making Julian sicker. However, Constance doesn't think so and believes Charles is just giving the proper medication to make Julian happier. When Charles arrives, he thinks he should go through John's papers. Constance and Julian leave the room. So Charles decides to threaten Mary since she keyed his car. He hopes to drive Mary away. At night, Mary decides to go harvest some things in the forest. Meanwhile, Charles wears John's suit. A song called Daddy's Home starts to play on their vinyl player. Then he dances with Constance. Constance starts to get even more smitten by him while he speaks Italian. The next morning, Mary starts to trash Charles' room and breaks the mirror. Charles is upset with Mary over this. Charles wants Constance to punish Mary. However, Constance doesn't want to do this. Mary gets up and runs to the forest. She finds all the things she had buried resurface. She thinks it's some sort of omen for more bad things to come. Then she hallucinates her parents saying that Mary should never be punished. Her mother looks at Mary disapprovingly. We can tell that Mary was probably physically abused by her father or punished a lot. Once Mary decides to head home, Charles asks Mary why doesn't she like him. Constance tries to keep the peace, but Charles keeps asking Mary the question. Mary goes upstairs and tosses a lit pipe into Charles's trash. She goes back downstairs and starts reciting all the poisonous mushrooms. Charles tells her to shut up. Mary then keeps talking about how the first symptoms won't appear until 12 hours. Charles has had enough and grabs Mary by the head. He drags her out the room while Mary kicks and screams. Constance follows them from behind, too terrified to do anything. Mary keeps saying, "Father, stop." Then, Charles smells the smoke coming from his room. He runs downstairs and tells Constance to grab the money out of the safe. Charles cowardly leaves the house and drives away. Luckily, Stella sees the fire from town and warns people of the fire at the Blackwood residence. While the room burns down, Constance is distraught because she had just cleaned the room. Uncle Julian grabs his manuscript before evacuating. However, Julian gets distracted and starts looking at photos instead of leaving. The sisters try to escape with him, but he doesn't respond. Meanwhile, the firemen have arrived and some are hesitant about putting out the fire. Jim tells them they have a job to do, so they do so begrudgingly. Some of the townsfolk outside chant saying they should let the house burn. Meanwhile, Mary and Constance are inside listening to them chanting. Once the fire is extinguished, Jim grabs a rock from outside and throws it at the house. This causes the mob of people to go in and loot the house. Charles goes back inside the house to try to open the safe, while the sisters escape through a window. Townsfolk grab Constance and Mary, then proceed to harass them. Once Uncle Julian's death is discovered, everyone splits. The next day, the two sisters go to the house to see everything in ruin. In the kitchen, Mary opens up and says their father was very cruel to her. She finally admits that she's the one who poisoned their father. Constance admits that she's always known. Mary was tired of his cruelty to both her and Constance. So she came up with the plan to put poison in the sugar since Constance doesn't eat sugar. Unfortunately, Uncle Julian was caught in the crossfire. Constance thanks Mary for saving her. Suddenly, Helen and Sam Clark come knocking at their house. They tell them that Julian's funeral will be planned for them. They let the sisters know that they're there for them if they need it. The girls realize that the stairs are broken now and they're unable to go upstairs. Random people from town start to stop by the house and leave food at their doorstep. The two sisters ignore all the knocking. Until finally, Charles comes back knocking. He apologizes for everything that has happened. Mary grabs her sister to hide under the table with her. Charles tells Constance that they can have a life together in Italy. He wants Constance to remember how he held her. He refuses to leave even after they ignore him. Charles tells Constance that no one else is going to love her. Then he gets furious and kicks the door open. He goes to Constance and lays on her while she screams no. Mary grabs a snow globe and hits Charles on the head with it. Even after he's laying there all bloody, Mary goes in for a final blow. Then, Mary digs a hole in the garden to bury the body. They get rid of the car and clean up the house. Later, we're back to the movie's intro. Mary writes in a manuscript about how things are going to change. Then, a bunch of kids start screaming from outside calling them witches. Mary goes to them and the boys immediately get spooked. They run away. The movie ends with the two sisters embracing their reputation as the evil witches that live in a castle.
Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like. It really helps the channel.